I just got off the plane from New York just a few hours ago. So I spent this morning in the Bronx, and I'm ending it in Iowa. And and last night I held a town hall in the Bronx on Medicare for All. And there were a lot of medical students there. There were a lot of people in my community there. And I told this story. It's a pretty recent story. It's a story about 18 months ago. I hadn't gone to the doctor in a few years. I didn't have health insurance. And I was working in a restaurant, and I hadn't seen a doctor in so long that I was starting to get anxious. You know, when you just haven't gone to a dentist, we haven't gone to a doctor in a while, and just every bump or every time your ankle feels weird, it creates so much anxiety, just the not knowing. And so I saved up a lot of money, for me, for most people, so I could go to the doctor. And since I worked off of tips, I literally showed up to the doctor with a purse full of cash. And I showed up and I had my appointment. And my doctor said, well, everything seems all right, but I think we're gonna need you to take a blood test, just to make sure. And I sat in the room with my doctor, and I just started to weep because I couldn't afford a blood test. And I had just shown up to the doctor with a bag full of cash to be told that I needed something that I couldn't afford so that I could know if there was something wrong with me or not. And if, God forbid, there was something wrong, I wouldn't know because I couldn't afford to know. I couldn't afford to know if I could do something to take preventative action to preserve my health. And so I sat there and I just wept. And my doctor just gave me a tissue, said, I don't know what to tell you. She said, but this is the blood test that you need, and come back to me if you can get it. And so this was not long ago. And she said, by the way, what do you do? And I said, I'm running for Congress. And while now, given the benefit of looking back, of that hindsight, that story feels so much differently now than it did then. Because in that moment, I felt ridiculous. I felt embarrassed, and I felt humiliated. What does a waitress showing up to a doctor with a bag full of cash that can't afford a blood test, what is someone like that doing running for office? That's the exact opposite of power. The exact opposite of power. And I almost felt foolish for saying that I was doing something that felt too big for my britches. But nevertheless, I left and I did what any millennial does, and I Googled free doctor. And I was able to find online, at least, one of 2 free clinics in New York City that I was able to kind of find online. And I went to the free clinic that weekend. I asked some of my volunteers if they could cover some of the canvassing launches. And I went and I sat in a free clinic, and they told me to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I showed up, and I waited 4 to 5 hours. From 8 a.m. to noon, 1 p.m. And I saw my neighbors, I saw children, I saw people that didn't look like they needed to go to a free clinic at all. walk in over 4 hours. And finally, my name was called, and I walked in, and I was seen by the generosity of medical students that were willing to give a Saturday or a Sunday to see and tend to people in our community. And they took my vitals, they did my blood test, and everything was fine. Everything ended up fine. And I was able to take that, save up for another bag of cash, go back to the doctor, and get a clean bill of health. And that experience, even though physically things ended up fine, that system is not fine. That is not fine. And I am tired of policymakers and politicians acting like people in free clinics are just those on the fringes that happen to fall through the cracks. Because that's not true. 30 million people in this country are uninsured, and far more are underinsured. Because before I didn't have insurance, I was paying $200 a month for an $8,000 deductible for catastrophic insurance, which ironically meant I couldn't afford to go to the doctor because I spent all my money on my insurance instead of my doctor. And when we talk about the immorality of a for-profit health insurance system, this is what we're talking about. This is what we're talking about. No other developed country on earth has a system as greedy and nonsensical as the healthcare system in the United States. No other. No other. Now, at the same time, as we are in this room today, the Trump administration is taking the ACA to court in order to gut some of the most transformative provisions in that legislation. It may not have been single payer. It may not have even had a public option, but at least at that point, we had coverage, we had the pre-existing conditions, and they're taking that to court. And if they are successful with this judicial process in making sure that our courts are stacked, we will be very close, or could be very close, back at zero. So the question is, how do we want to imagine our healthcare system to be? And the healthcare system that we want is Medicare for all, no cracks in the system. Every single human being in the United States of America deserves to be able to go to the doctor, deserves to afford their insulin, should never be afraid about what that test will come back, will have access to preventative care. That at its base is such a core part of human dignity, decency in the 21st century. That is what this campaign is about. No matter what, time advances. We decide if society advances with it. We decide.
So that was a really heartfelt and powerful story from AOC about the cruelty of our current healthcare system. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that she was willing to put herself out there like that and share her story with us, because it's not always easy to put yourself out there like that, to share a personal story of yourself when you were at your most vulnerable. But you know, it is very important that we talk about the cruelty and the injustice of our current healthcare system, because this isn't some game. People die every year in America due to lack of coverage, and the estimates are staggering. It is estimated that upwards of 45,000 people in America die per year due to lack of coverage. But notice how I said in America, because there are a lot of countries that already guarantee healthcare to all of their people as a right. And thus, their people do not lose their lives due to lack of health coverage. That seems like the morally right thing to do, does it not? To make sure one's people are healthy and well? And yet, we here in America do not do that. And as a result, as aforementioned, we lose a lot of people per year due to lack of coverage. Moreover, a less broached aspect of the healthcare debate is that a lot of people go bankrupt due to medical expenses, which would not be a thing if we joined the many countries around the world and guaranteed healthcare to all of our people as a right. In truth, if we did, nobody would go bankrupt because everybody would be covered. You know, it is just beyond unbelievable to me the greed of the drug companies and the health insurance companies in this country. Now, the media and seemingly most of our politicians in Washington make it seem as if the idea of guaranteeing healthcare to all of our people as a right is some radical idea, and that it would cost too much. But don't be fooled. Medicare for All, the universal healthcare plan Bernie Sanders introduced, would reportedly save we the American people a ton of money. So, in short, Bernie's Medicare for All bill would guarantee healthcare to all, significantly reduce the amount of money we spend as a country on healthcare, and save the many people we lose per year due to lack of coverage. It's honestly a no-brainer. And according to poll after poll, most Americans do support it, including almost half of Republicans. And yet, most of our politicians in Washington do not, which, by the way, includes most of our Democratic politicians as well. So this is not some partisan issue. But thankfully, we have at least a few politicians in Washington who support Medicare for All, like Alexandria. Overall, she is just awesome, and we need to elect more politicians like her because it is beyond time that we finally join the many countries around the world and guarantee healthcare to all of our people as a right.